This video is about assessment. Why assess? Traditionally, assessment has been about measuring achievement, reading age relative to peers. I'm not interested in that. I want to know what the student knows and can do, diagnose the difficulties, and determine the next steps. I also want to measure progress. And if you assess most students, the results may just surprise you. So, reading age assessments do not easily distinguish between kids who are reading properly and those who are very proficient at compensating for their lack of skill, just as merely measuring how long it takes a student to swim to the other end of the pool doesn't really tell you whether they are swimming as a dog paddler or a really good swimmer. Are the reading, as good readers do, making an auditory process, or is it primarily visual? That's what you're looking for. Secondly, are they developing the skills that lead to competency as an adult? It's possible to read 8-year-old reading material by the look and guess system or a variation of it and seem quite proficient. But this breaks down as students get older and encounter more and more words they cannot guess at, and are expected to read lengthy passages that soon result in exhaustion. So for the kids who are struggling, where exactly is it breaking down? Where should the student start? And is the student making progress in developing these underpinning skills? These are the underpinning skills. The ability to tease spoken words apart and to detect each component's sound. And that's essential for remembering words and knowing how to spell them. The ability to put those sounds together instantly and effortlessly, essential for fluency and therefore for comprehension. The ability to use these skills to read unfamiliar words, including nonsense words, and to acquire letter sound knowledge, which is essential for building that basic sight word knowledge for both decoding and spelling. Then there are the cognitive skills, rapid automatized naming, the ability to bring up from memory and say a word, and their working memory. It's very difficult to make a change in those. They're mostly, working memory is something that seems to be something that you're born with. It's very difficult to make a change. The strategy there is to teach ways of coping, ways to get past those limitations. And then, of course, there are the spoken language skills, vocabulary and so on, and background knowledge. And those are best developed and most quickly developed in the process of reading and wide reading. So the assessments I'm talking about today are on the Agility with Sound website. If you just go to the website and up the top, you'll see a tab that says Free Assessment Tool. The spelling test is also on the WordChain website. And there you will find the assessments that I'm going to be talking about right now, recording forms, and there are videos to show you how to administer the tests and interpret the results. So I'll be going through it now, but the videos there go through it in a little bit more detail. This will tell you where the difficulties are and where to start. So the first thing is phonics awareness. And it takes the form of a spelling test that looks a bit like this. Can the students spell these sounds in simple words? Can they still do this when the words become more complex? It's all very well to be able to spell SH in shop, but can you still spell it in a longer word like crushed? Or ist in a word like fist? But what happens when you get to a word like twister? Is it still automatic? Does the student perceive both sounds in the initial blends and the final blends? And many children do not. Can the student distinguish between the voiced and the unvoiced consonants, the difference between p and b, and k and g and t and d and so on, and between ch and sh and I and E. Does the student know how those simple suffixes are spelt? ER and LE and so on. And does the student know those basic spelling conventions, when to use a final E, when to use a double consonant? So the spelling assessment looks a bit like this. And for those of you who can't see it, these first words are that, beg, hid, mop, bud. A, a, with a P and a B and a G and a T and a D. And I just read that word, these words one at a time to the student. I tell them that they're likely to be unfamiliar words, that they probably have never learned them, but I just want to see how you think they should be spelt. And then they can write it down on a whiteboard or on a piece of paper. You can do this one at a time, or you can do it with a whole class at once. And then I analyze it like this. I write down exactly what the student did. So for that, and I tell the student, see what I'm doing? That, really emphasizing that the. But nevertheless, many students will just still write down for, to. And I don't tell the students whether they're right or wrong. And whether they're right or wrong, I put down whatever they wrote. Big, many students will do a capital B here. E, k, maybe K. Hid, D. That doesn't look right. Think I'll add an E. No, I don't think the E belongs. So I'm doing everything the child did. Mop, maybe a backwards B there. And bud, child after child after child does this. And for some children, you might stop there if they've clearly got no idea. They just put down a random assortment of letters. That would be the place to stop. But otherwise, keep going. I'm just putting down the sorts of things that lots of kids do. Thud, th, d. Lots of kids will do that. Maybe that. Moth, of. Even if they get it right up here, they're likely to do something different at the end of a word. And then I'm looking to see whether the students detect both sounds in the initial blends. Let's say the student for spared wrote down S-E-D, and then thought afterwards, there's a P in there, and so added a P. So I'll do that to show that it was an afterthought. I'm really looking for the students thinking. Okay, and then coming down here, I'm looking to see whether they detect those L's and R's in flop and prod and club and slack and grub. And some students will get the L's but not the R's, some will get the R's but not the L's, and some won't get any. So you might get, let's say they get F, O, P, and maybe they do a B, and maybe get that R, get that one right. And K, B, over and over, I've seen that for club. Slack, S, A, and grub might be G, R, A, capital B. When the student is doing capital B's and capital D's, inevitably, the reason is that they don't know the difference between uppercase and lowercase B and D. I'm just going to do these ones here. Trot, ch, ch. Maybe something like that, and so on. And then decking, what I'm looking for here is that ing, Most kids will get that. But rudder, you might get this. Mucky, you might get this. Maybe there. Fitted, fit, id, maybe not two T's, and tapped, apt. Those are the skills that are involved in word chain 1. So stop at that point and then just start analysing where it's gone wrong. I'm not going to tick what's right and wrong. I'm not interested in what's right and wrong. I'm looking for where the errors are. So there, the difference between f and the difference between k and g, the silent E, I'll just make a wee note over here. The role of the silent E is not clear. The difference between p and b is there, the difference between p and b, and then at the same time that a. So this student hasn't got the sh. They've put a for the a sound. They've put th there, and they know it's a d sound, but this. So I'm going to leave that. But I've made a note there that b and d is a problem. Here that ch is a problem. Here that difference between f and th is a problem. They're not really getting that. Let's say they got that one, but not that one. They got that one, but not that one. And they also had this problem here. They didn't hear that L. They don't know CK. And here we've got that. And going over to here, don't know that tr. Here's that CK as a problem again. That double D fitting in there, that CK, and that double P. Ing is okay, but often and often you'll find students that don't know those. So you've got a lot to work on there. There's no point in going on. You can see straight away that the difference between a and is a problem. You can see that the difference between those voiced and unvoiced consonants is a problem. F and v, k and g, p and b, and so on. These digraphs, sh, th, ch, and th, needs teaching, and the student needs to learn to hear those L's in those blends. And then, of course, they need to learn these simple suffixes. Heaps to go on with there. I'm not adding up the errors, I'm adding up the kinds of errors. So there's that one, the difference between a and a. That's one error. Secondly, the difference between the voiced and unvoiced consonants. That has to be worked on. Thirdly, hearing the sounds in the blends, hearing the digraphs, that's 4, and knowing these simple suffixes, that's 5. So 3 or 4 different sorts of errors, and you know that this child needs to start at word chain 1. Let's say that was all fairly straightforward though. We move on to these skills. This relates to word chain 2 now. Many, over and over and over again, I see children making this, H-A-I-N-G for hung. So I'm looking at the final blends here now and some other features. But here we've got fist, lend, damp, link, bunch, duffer, twisting, crushed, tricky, bungle, blankly. Fist, a lot of kids will get fist, but then when it comes down here to twisting, some of it gets left out because it's just too much to think about. Lend, a lot of kids will do L-E-D. Damp, D-A-P, not hearing that M. And I don't know why, but many children add an E there and not there. Link, L-E-K, confusing the E and the I. It's quite difficult to hear in that word. Bunch, B-A-C-H, duffer, D-A-F-A, quite a common spelling. Crushed, really common. Tricky, like this. Bungle, anything could happen for that L-E. Blankly, I often see that. Plucked, hearing that t at the end of the word, and so on. The video on the Agility of the Sound website and the word chain website will go into this in more detail. So we've got that and that whole thing. Got that one right. Lend, but not hearing that N, not hearing that M, not hearing that N. This is really common. And at the same time, that the true boundary between I and E is showing up. That is going to be a problem. That is a problem. That hearing that st in a longer word, got the cr, we haven't got the we haven't lost the sh, and of course knowing that that's ed. Here lost that ck, even if they had it earlier, and lost that. Here that and lee, and that nk, and so on. And so you can see what this child needs to move on to, and so on. So that just keeps going. For the students that find that easy, this is the test that relates to word chain 3 and word chain 4. Now, too many students know too many words by rote at this point, so I'm starting to use made up words. Clane, I'm looking for 2 ways to spell clane, and the student might get one of them, C-L-A-N-E, and the next one, something weird but possible, C-A-L-A-Y-N maybe. So A-N-E is instinctive, A-I-N is not. And then there's another guide which tells you that this is covered in word chain 3, this is covered in word chain 4. Lote, same thing, L-O-T-E, maybe they know that one, and maybe the something else might happen, L-O-A-T-E, and so on. So you're looking for things. These spelling patterns are much the most common for those sounds, and these should jump into the student's head really quickly. It should be instinctive to just put those down. So for here, there are 2 possible spellings of lota, there are 2 possible spellings of claning, there are 3 possible spellings of fret and freta, but just 1 for freta and sart and sawn, 2 for torse, an SE and a CE, 1 for rauge, 1 for raj, and so on. And that's what you're looking for there. And there's an accompanying table that tells you whether it's word chain 3 or word chain 4 that is covered in that. So that's those. Then we move on to the decoding test. It's all very well to know those sounds, but putting them together is a different skill altogether. So this is on the website as well, and you can just download recording forms and see where it's breaking down for these kids. So a child that can spell these words easily, had no trouble here, does not necessarily able to read them easily. That's quite common. So here we've got many kids will go cat, pet, pet, lip, lip, rot. You can't read like that. So if a student is reading like that, keep them going. I'm in the beginning, I'm telling the student that I just want to see how many words they can read correctly in a minute. So keep the timer going for a full minute. And then without the student seeing, I'm just counting on my fingers under the table how many errors that child is making. So if the child is going cat, pet, lip, and so on, huge, fun, tin, taught, man, nut, and in a minute they get to there and they made 1, 2, 3 errors, then I will just count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 3 errors. Just something like that, so that you're 9 out of 12, 9 correct if you want. Far too slow, too many errors. That student needs to start at level 1. However, if they read cat, pet, lip, rot, huge, fun, tin, tot, man, able to process that amount of information, even if they're making the odd error, I just get to the point where they get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 words and say, far too easy, let's move over. And we move over to this one. Same words, but with simple suffixes, and ch, sh, and th are coming in. Now, with many students, you will suddenly see that everything changes. Their whole demeanor changes. Suddenly, instead of being quite relaxed when they were reading this, suddenly there's a bit of a frown appears. Suddenly they're leaning forward. Suddenly they're really concentrating. And if they're really concentrating on just figuring out the words, then you know that they're not going to be able to both read these words and comprehend if this was real text. So, and you'll see them slowing down as well and starting to make more and more errors. So, chat, Sean, gash, you know that they can't read like that. Even if they go chat, Sean, gash, rich, and suddenly the word's a bit longer, and this is where it's starting to break down. Buddy, biddy, but you cannot read like that. If that was real text, you could not read like that. So this is the point where you keep going for a full minute, counting the errors in a way that the child cannot see, and you figure out with a different score. You figure out with, let's say, 5 errors and 16 words attempted, let's say. If that's too easy, just keep going to this one. You'll notice that the words are unfamiliar. Mocked, guzzle, wicker, packer, buckle. They're not likely to be sight words. I have chosen to use unfamiliar words rather than made up pseudo words because I want to see the kids fix up strategies. Ticking. If you just look at this bit and you see this bit more, the child is likely to say ticking. This one, tacker, trying to make it a real word, so that their instinct is to override their decoding if it doesn't sound right. Not trusting what they are seeing and not trusting what they're figuring out. And it just keeps going. This is level 5, where the words are still all short vowel sounds, but the words are much longer. To it, and so on until we get to these. And you really have to focus on the vowels to read peach, pooch, pouch, porch, poach, parched. Now, so you're just finding the point at where the child is starting to really struggle. Now, I never, with either this or the spelling test, tell the student where they went wrong or where they went right. I make no comment at all. I do not ever tell the child that was an Can you see now that it should be Arthur? I never do that, because if you don't use this as a teaching tool, you can then redo this test at some later date when you want to know what progress has been made for whatever reason, and see if you're getting a different result. You should be able to see that there is far less circled here, that some of that is being sorted out, and knowing what is yet to be worked on. And the same here. You should be able to, here, after an intervention, the student should be reading many more words than 12, and these errors should be starting to sort themselves out. Though for kids who are in the habit of using U for the A for the sound, or confusing and adding E's in a random way, overriding that takes quite a bit of intervention. You really need to, it takes a lot of work. So don't be surprised if it takes a little while to sort out some of those difficulties. But these hearing the sounds and the blends, learning those that should be much quicker.